Hi there, and welcome to our More to Life webinar for today, which is kindly being hosted by Rosalind Bubb. Rosalind is a trained therapist and will be talking us through her 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. If you're watching this video live, if you're watching this video live, there will be an opportunity to ask Rosalind questions at the end of the session. There is a Q&A icon along the bottom on the toolbar. And whilst your questions won't show on the recording, we do recommend that you select to ask your questions anonymously. I'm going to hand you over now to Rosalind, who will take you through her 6-step plan. There we go. So if you want to turn my video off, wonderful. And you can start now.
Good. There we are. I hope that's all working and that you can all see me. Hello everybody, it's very nice to see you today. My name is Rosalind. Oh, I've got you on the wrong screen. There we are. My name is Rosalind Bubb, and as Kat said, I'm a therapist. And I'd like to welcome you to our webinar today, which is about how to be happy and peaceful after childlessness. And as you can see, this is part of our series of webinars which are being hosted by More to Life. And so we're really pleased that you're joining us today. So thank you very much for being here. So to begin with, I would just like to tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover today. So to begin with, I'll tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm doing this, and then we will touch on why it is that you might be watching today. And I'm going to introduce you to my 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. And I'm going to talk to you about how you can use that for yourself to be happier and living a more enjoyable life, whatever state you're at this point in your life. And then at the end, there'll be an opportunity to ask any questions if you'd like to do that. So, to begin with, a little bit about myself. I'm a therapist, and I've been a therapist since 2004. I've had 12 miscarriages, and I don't have any children. But in spite of that, I find myself in the unusual position of being happy and peaceful and enjoying my life, even though I don't have any children. And I know that's quite an unusual state to be in, having had 12 miscarriages and lost those babies. To be happy and peaceful anyway is quite unusual, and that's actually why I do what I do, because I want to share the tools and the knowledge that I've gained over the years. So now a little bit about why you might be watching. Well, chances are that if you're watching the webinar today, then you're childless and that your child is not by choice. And I'm not sure whether you're familiar with what Jodie Day talks about, 50 ways not to be a mother or a parent indeed. And there are many reasons why you might find yourself in the position that you're in today if you're childless. Possibly you've tried to have a baby and maybe you weren't able to conceive, or you might have had IVF, possibly lots of rounds of IVF. You might have tried to adopt. You may have been prevented by circumstances. There are so many reasons why we can find ourselves in life without children when we wanted to have them. So some circumstances might have prevented you, and also it's possible that you might have actually been able to become pregnant, but for whatever reason you were forced to terminate a pregnancy. So for whatever reason we find ourselves childless now, chances are that there are some feelings which we have in common. So you may well feel unhappy about being childless. You might feel sad, you might feel disappointed, you might feel hurt, invalid, left out, and it may well be that you're wanting to find a way through all of this. And there may have been some things which you've already tried to make you feel happier and more peaceful, to enjoy life more. You might have tried talking about your situation to somebody, you might have had counselling, you might have tried to identify a plan B. That's how people sometimes describe finding what it is that you'd really like to do with your life as you're not able to have children. And all of these different steps are really good, and they're valuable and they're useful, and they can be very helpful, but they may not be enough. They may not have actually been sufficient to stop you feeling unhappy about being childless when you wanted to have a family. So I want to let you know that it is possible to be happy and peaceful after childlessness. And it is possible to live a fulfilling and enjoyable life. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is a tried and tested process. It's something which I've used on myself and I've also used with lots of clients. And I'm going to introduce you to your 6-step plan for how you can be happy and peaceful after childlessness. So then, let's begin. So to begin with, I'd just like to talk to you about how I came to create this 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. Between the ages of 32 and 39, I had 12 miscarriages. One of them was when I was 14 weeks pregnant, one was after an ectopic pregnancy, and one was after IVF. And I actually became a therapist between my second and third miscarriage. And 9 years ago, my husband and I made the decision to stop trying. And 9 years later, I find myself happy and peaceful and actually without regrets. And I know that this really is quite an unusual position to find myself in. And so I don't, although this is a strange thing to say, I don't wish that it had turned out differently, and it doesn't cause me pain that I don't have children. And so I just wanted to let you know what my focus has been since I started being a therapist in 2004. So since then, my main focus, well, not my main one, but one of my key focuses was actually healing the pain of my own miscarriages. And I put a lot of time and effort into that, and that's actually been very successful. The second focus I've had since being a therapist since 2004 is to help other people to be happy and peaceful and effective. And I worked for years as a general therapist, and I still do that now. And then since 2013, I've been supporting people who've had miscarriages to help them to feel more happy and peaceful. And I do that through one-to-one therapy sessions with people wherever they are in the world using Skype and FaceTime. I've also created tap-along videos. Now you're going to hear me talk about 2 self-help tools throughout this webinar. And one of them is EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Techniques, and that's sometimes known as tapping, and that involves tapping on energy meridians on your hands and on your face. And I'm going to talk to you about those in lots more detail as we go on. But as part of that, I've created tap-along videos, which is where you watch me and you tap along with me, and it changes the way you feel. And I've actually created a miscarriage support program, which is a series of 16 tap-along videos, which address different aspects of recovering emotionally after a miscarriage. So that's been my focus since 2013. And then in the autumn of 2017, last year, I met a lady called Nikki Fletcher, and she was in the process of beginning to set up an online magazine for people who are childless not by choice. It's the Childless Not by Choice magazine. And we had a conversation and we agreed that as a result of that, I would create tap-along videos for each edition of the online magazine. So I've been doing that. And there's one in every edition, and those come out every 2 months. And so as part of this process of creating the tap-along videos for the Childless Not by Choice magazine, I really looked in detail and I thought about this, and I asked myself, well, how did I get to be here, to be happy and peaceful in spite of being childless? Because it's not a common thing to be. And so in the process of looking at that in detail, I identified 6 elements and 6 components which have gone to make up this 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. Now, before I go any further, I want to just stress one key point, which is that this isn't a linear process. So in other words, we don't start at step number 1 and then go 2, 3, 4, 5. We don't move down like that. In fact, it's actually, when I'm working with people, what I've discovered is that we move around seamlessly from step to step, often covering a number of steps in one session. We move backwards and forwards. And as I said, it's not linear. We don't start at the beginning in number 1 and move down to number 6. And also what I've discovered is that doing any of these steps helps. Any of these steps help you to feel happy and more peaceful after childlessness. But what happens if you actually use all of them is that it adds up to a really powerful combination to help you to feel happy and more peaceful. So then, before we actually begin to look at what each of these steps are, I'd just like to introduce you to a key concept, a key idea. I'm just going to add some water. So, my key idea that we're talking about is imagining that we have an emotional rain barrel. Now, in the United Kingdom, we don't call it a rain barrel, we call it a water butt. And I think in Australia and in New Zealand, they refer to it as a rainwater tank. And I believe in the United States, they refer to it as a rain barrel. And I'll just tell you briefly what a rain barrel does. So a rain barrel stands next to a building, and there's a pipe that drains from the roof all the way down and catches the water below in the rain barrel, and that water can then be used to water plants in the garden. So that's what it is. And so I've been using this particular analogy for 10 years or more, and I'll just let you know how I first thought about it, or what it is based on. So this analogy of your emotional rain barrel is based on the rain barrel that my grandmother had in her garden when I was a little girl. And her rain barrel stood next to her garage where her car was stored, and the water from the roof ran down into the rain barrel below. And I think actually, I don't think I was very big from this memory, and I think the rain barrel might have been about the same size as me, or possibly even slightly larger. So what I can remember seeing as a child is that the rain barrel was full right to the very top. So the water had come right to the very top like this. And in fact, actually, it was so full that it had created a kind of cushion on the surface, kind of cushion of water that was actually slightly above the top of the lip of the rain barrel. And this cushion of water was being held by the surface tension. And I believe the skin of water that holds it like this is called a meniscus. And so when I saw this as a little girl, I was really, surprised seeing sort of a cushion of water above the top of the rain barrel. And I touched it. And what I did was I broke the water pressure, and suddenly lots of water cascaded down the edges, which gave me a big shock, as you might imagine. And it's made a big impact on me. I remember that ever since. And so what I'd like us to consider for this analogy is that we have an emotional rain barrel. So we have our rain barrel, which is here when we're born. And when we're born, our rain barrel is empty. But as events happen in our life, as things go by, little bit by little bit, more and more water fills up in our rain barrel. And so when I'm talking about events happening, I'm talking about unpleasant things like bereavements, accidents, shocks, illnesses, unpleasant events, that kind of thing. So to begin with, it's empty. And then as we go through life, stuff begins to fill up our rain barrel. And it can get to the point where our rain barrel is completely full right to the very top. And sometimes it can even, get so far that we have like this sort of meniscus and this sort of cushion of water on the surface. And what happens then in terms of the emotional rain barrel is that just one more event, just one more drop of water coming in like that can be all it takes for the meniscus to break and for the quite a lot of water to suddenly pour over the edge. And in an emotional example of this, that can be where one more little event happens, and that's all it takes for us to feel unable to cope emotionally. So the reaction that we have is disproportionate to the event that happened, and it's because our rain barrel is completely full. Just one more little event, and it's as if our emotions kind of roll over the top, and we don't feel comfortable, and we don't necessarily feel as if we can cope. And as I say, it's an uncomfortable state to be in. And actually what I find is that sometimes when my clients come and work with me, they've reached this state. They feel completely full to the very top, and they haven't got as much emotional capacity or reserves as they would have if there was more space in their emotional rain barrel. Which brings me on to what it is that I help people do. So I help people to empty some of the water out of your emotional rain barrel. And what that means, if we empty this water out of your emotional rain barrel, is you've got space for quite a lot more stuff, more water to come in before you reach this top point, before you reach the point where it's completely full up to overflowing and one more little drop is all it takes for you to kind of have had too much to cope emotionally. So what I help people do is to drain space in their emotional rain barrel. Now, sometimes we take a lot out, sometimes we just take a small amount out, and sometimes it can be as if we've turned the tap on and water is dripping out. So there's a whole range of how much you can actually remove. But what this does, when you remove some water from your emotional rain barrel, when you take some of these events out, is it gives you space, it gives you emotional capacity, it gives you emotional resilience and reserves, because you now have all of this space for more stuff to come in before you reach the point where it sort of rolls over the top. So I'm going to be referring to your emotional rain barrel throughout this webinar because it's a key idea as to how we can actually help you to feel happier and more peaceful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to begin to talk to you about the 6 steps in your plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. So here is step number 1. So step number 1 in your 6-step plan is removing the painful emotions from upsetting and traumatic memories. So I'm going to ask you a question. What is it that you have in your emotional rain barrel? So we're talking about any kind of upsetting, traumatic or traumatic memory. For example, memories that you have from any bereavements you might have experienced, memories of accidents, shocks, illness. It's possible to accumulate some really unpleasant memories if you've had IVF or if you've had an infertility or miscarriages. And also there are lots of potentially upsetting memories to do with being infertile or being childless not by choice. And the effects of having this kind of painful and upsetting memory in our emotional rain barrel is that it's effectively, it's like it's stuck there. It's in the emotional rain barrel, it's in your body, it's in your energy system. And the effects of having this kind of unpleasant memory being stuck in our system is that it can affect us. It can contribute to us feeling scared, anxious. This kind of upsetting memory can contribute to us feeling sad or low or depressed. If you have any kind of illness, it can make the illness, the symptoms worse. It can make pain worse, for example. And it's not commonly known about, but it is possible to take the painful emotions away from upsetting and traumatic memories. Now, people don't generally know that you can do that, but it is really possible and it isn't difficult. So, for example, if you've got some really upsetting memories, they might actually be quite intrusive. They might sort of pop up when you least want them. When it's the last thing you want to think about, and there it is. It's right there in front of your face. And that can be what it's like before we work with these upsetting memories. But after we work with them, instead of being like this, it's as if they kind of gently float down and they don't hurt us so much. Sometimes people describe it as it's like watching it on television. So the television is over there, you can see the event that happened, you remember the memory, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It feels much more neutral, you feel disconnected from it, and it's much, much less immediate. It's over here, so it doesn't hurt in the same way. And so the way we do that is we use these 2 self-help tools, which I'll be telling you more about as we go on: EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and TAT, tapas acupressure technique. And what these 2 techniques do is they release the emotions very easily and gently. And the way we do it means that you don't have to talk about it. So you don't get re-traumatized. Now, if you do want to talk about it, you're very welcome to, but you don't have to, and you don't have to re-experience it. You don't get re-traumatized by it. And the end result is that you feel better. And this really is a skill for life. Being able to take the painful emotions away from upsetting and traumatic memories really is a skill for life, which you can use in all sorts of areas. As life goes on, whatever happens, you can take the painful emotions away from those memories. And that really can help us to feel a lot more happy and peaceful. So that's step number 1. So now we're going to move on to step number 2. Okay, so step number 2 is to facilitate any grieving, which it would be helpful to do. Now, grief is not something which is widely talked about, and you might look at that and think, I don't think so, thank you. I don't want to do that. I'm not interested in grieving. That can be a really common reaction, and it's understandable because it can be a frightening prospect to imagine going through more grief. And I don't know whether you're aware of this, sometimes people aren't, but when we're childless not by choice, there can be a real component of grief there for the family that we haven't had. Sometimes people don't realise that's one of the reasons why we can feel so unhappy. Actually, we're grieving. And any time there is some kind of grief or loss in your emotional rain barrel, It could be from events which haven't been fully grieved for. Then when we experience other grief, that can trigger the old grief that's still in our emotional rainbow. And so, for example, if you find yourself going through a new grief now, so it's not uncommon for people to lose a parent if they get older. When you're grieving for that parent, you might find that that grief triggers old grief that hasn't been fully healed from the past, maybe from miscarriages or from infertility treatment or from other losses, other people, other events and things that we've lost in our life. And suddenly, not only are you coping with the new grief, you're trying to cope with all of it, with all the old grief as well. And that can be really overwhelming and upsetting and a lot to cope with. And sometimes things that we're grieving for can be linked to trauma and unpleasant memories. So that can be linked to step number 1 that we were describing before. So it can be really tempting just to push our grief down, to try not to feel it, to seal it up somewhere, maybe in our head or in our heart. It's a place that we just don't go to. And we're scared of opening it up for fear of being swept away by the intensity of the emotion. And this is all really understandable. And it's completely understand why we do this. So the good news is that EFT tapping and TAT can both really ease the grief. They can facilitate it. It makes it able, they can help us to grieve safely and easily and more manageably. And both of these techniques can help us to ease and soften the emotions of grief. They can help us to ease and soften the memories. And all of this together can be really very helpful. And it's all one step in helping us to be more happy and peaceful. So that's step number 2. So moving on to step number 3. Step number 3 is changing any limiting or disempowering beliefs that you have about being childless. So then, what limiting or just disempowering beliefs do you have about being childless? Well, it's all very well to ask that question, but how do we even know what limiting or disempowering beliefs do we have? You know, that's quite a strange thing to ask. Well, there's a key way to tell. So the question is, what are you saying? Either you're saying to other people, or it may just be that you're saying to yourself. If you listen to what you're saying, that can be a real insight into any limiting or disempowering beliefs. So some examples of what you might be saying to other people or to yourself include things like, I'm unhappy, it's not fair, I can't be happy without children, I can't bear the prospect of not being a parent. What's the point of my life if I don't have children? You might be saying something to yourself like, I'm unworthy, I'm not worthy, I'm invalid. You might feel like you're a failure. You might be saying, I'm scared of growing old without having any children. You might be saying, I'm angry, I'm stuck. Any of these are examples of limiting disempowering beliefs. So, would you like to be able to change any of these? So the really good news is that we have tools which can do that. Both EFT tapping and TAT are incredibly effective at changing our beliefs. And when I'm working with somebody and when we identify a limiting belief, what we do is we rate it on a scale of 0 to 10. So 8 out of 10 means, well, that really is quite strong. And 0 or 1 out of 10 means, well, that has reduced considerably and it might even have disappeared. It commonly disappears. And we actually see the beliefs changing in front of our eyes. It's extraordinary. It's a really enjoyable process. It's extraordinary and it isn't difficult. And so I'd like to just sort of let you know about what a difference it can make when we do this. So this is an example. This is a quote from one of the people I've worked with. And what she said was, working with Rosalind got me from feeling, facing the fact that I can't be a mother terrifies me, to feeling this is okay. And if I can't be a mother, I'm blooming going to make the most of everything else which life has to offer, which I have. So there are 2 things that I want to point out about what she said. The first thing is, facing not being a mother terrified her. So, you know, it's just really, really strong stuff. And after we'd worked together, she moved to the position of thinking, this is okay. And if I can't be a mother, I'm going to make the most of everything else, which life has to offer, which I have. So that second bit, and making the most of it, that's the kind of the getting on with your life. That's the plan B that people often talk about. But I just wanted to point out how much nicer it can be, how much easier it is if it genuinely feels okay as it is, and you're going to make the most of it on top of that, as opposed to just trying to make the most of life without children, which can involve pushing through the pain and the upset And that can actually still leave you with the terror of not being able to be a mother or whatever the strong emotion is. So this really is possible, and it's possible for you. Okay, so that's step number 3. Step number 4 involves being able to deal with upsetting and triggering situations. When we're childless-not by choice, we can find ourselves in lots of upsetting situations which can trigger really strong emotional reactions in us, and these can have a really strong impact. And I don't underestimate that, because I really remember what that feels like, and sometimes these things still trigger me now. So I'm going to talk about 2 different kinds of emotionally triggering situations. So first of all, there are the random events which happen, and they're not predictable, and we don't have any warning about them. And I'm talking about something like standing in the queue at the supermarket and suddenly a baby in the queue next to you starts to cry. And I can actually remember crying myself under circumstances like that on one occasion. It could be an example like suddenly you see a pregnant woman, or you hear about a pregnancy announcement, and maybe in family or friends or somebody in a social circle. And all of those things can be really upsetting, and they can trigger really strong emotions in us. And those are the random ones. Now, the other kind are the ones which are more predictable. And I'm talking about things like going to social events where either there will be children, or you know that people are going to be talking about children. And again, those events can be really upsetting. We can feel really isolated and alone and hurt and invalid and like failures. And this can just be immensely hurtful. And I know that these feelings can go on for days and days, if not weeks afterwards. So this kind of thing can be really upsetting and triggering. So the 2 tools which I use, EFT tapping and TAT, can be used before, during, and after these events to help you feel better. And I'm talking about the tapping in particular. So for example, before an event. Now, chances are, if you're going to a social event where you know there are going to be children, and that's likely to be upsetting, you may well have experienced that kind of thing before, possibly many times before. And the memories of that, the upsetting memories of the times that you've been the only person or one of the very few people without children at a social event, all of those memories, those unpleasant memories, are in your emotional rain barrel. So one of the ways that we can help you to deal with this kind of upsetting, triggering situation in advance is to take those painful memories out of your emotional rain barrel, to take the pain away from those memories so that they don't hurt in the same way. And also, beforehand, we can tap on any dread that you have in anticipation of going, and that can help to really reduce the levels of fear and the anxiety and the sort of the dismay about how it's going to be. So that's dealing with it beforehand. And then there are tools we can use whilst you're actually there. So although when I initially showed you what tapping looks like, and I know if you've never seen this before, it looks absolutely ridiculous, there are also ways of doing it far more discreetly. So for example, I'm tapping or rubbing or holding now, and this is far more discreet. So I'm actually doing it now, but you wouldn't know, you can't see. So we can actually use these tools whilst we're in these situations, and those can help to reduce the intensity of the emotions that we're experiencing in the moment. And then lastly, you can use tapping after an event to take it out of your emotional rain barrel before it gets stuck in there. So we can reduce the emotions, we can reduce the pain of the memory, and that allows us to let it go and to forget it and just to get on with our week without sort of being burdened and weighed down by the memories of what's happened. So all of these events, before, during, and after, are all very helpful for actually managing strong and upsetting and triggered emotions. And when we can do this, when you have the tools that can do this, and as I say, there's very discreet ways of doing this, and I can teach you all of those, they can really leave us feeling empowered and feel powerful and in control. Because we can't actually stop these situations from happening, but we can reduce how upset they make us. So that is step number 4. So step number 5 in your 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness is feeling emotionally balanced on a day-to-day basis. So I have a question for you. How full is your rain barrel? Now, if you have some space in your emotional rain barrel, remember that means you've got space for more stuff to come in before it reaches the point where it just rolls over the top. So capacity in this context equals emotional resilience. And so what we're aiming for is to have this room in your emotional rain barrel for whatever life throws at us to come in. And the way that we do that, of actually emptying it, I've described already. We can empty large amounts out by dealing with unpleasant and traumatic memories from the past, and also by helping you to grieve, to facilitating the grieving. But what we can also do, in addition to draining large amounts out at once, is many rain barrels have a little tap on them. And so what we can do is we can turn the tap, which allows the water, a little trickle of water or water to drip out. And so even though more stuff is coming in, water is also going out at the same time, and we can preserve that space for your emotional reserves and capacity and resilience. So the question is, what habits and routines can you develop that you can actually do on a daily basis to help you feel emotionally balanced, to help you to feel happy and peaceful and well on a day-to-day basis? Now, there are a number of things which people use, and a lot of them are all extremely helpful. Yoga can make a big difference. Meditation is also very helpful. Prayer, if that's something that you like to do, can be incredibly helpful. Journaling can be really useful. Going for a walk, getting fresh air, any kind of exercise, those are all useful tools for helping us to feel emotionally balanced on a day-to-day basis. And then in addition to that, there are the two self-help techniques which I use, EFT tapping and TAT. They're both sometimes described as being like emotional acupuncture, but without the needles. They're both very easy to do, they're very simple to incorporate into your daily life, and they can be like opening the tap on your rain barrel. So that water is continuing to come out, even though life is throwing stuff at us and stuff is going in, water is still coming out, and we're preserving our emotional reserves here. And all of this can really contribute to us feeling emotionally balanced on a day-to-day basis, and that's really helpful if you want to be happy and peaceful. So that's step number 5. Step number 6 is creating and inventing how you would like your life to be. So this one is really fun. So up until now, we've been talking about emptying your emotional rain barrel, and by emptying your emotional rain barrel, what that is really allowing us to do is for it to be okay as it is. It's okay for us to be childless in a way that it wasn't before, and we can actually cope with whatever it is that life brings. And that can help us to be happy and peaceful on a day-to-day basis. But what's really great is that if you actually add to that, how would you like your life to be? If it was easy to envision a happy, peaceful life, what would it involve? How would you like to spend your time? And what I find is that when we use these other steps, when we deal with steps 1 to 5, actions just naturally arise, and it can be a very enjoyable process. So rather than having explicitly to think, well, now how do I want my life to be and what am I going to do? As we're clearing the other steps and as we're using the other steps, what often happens is people say, I could do that. I never realized that. Oh, wow, I could do this. I didn't think that was possible. And as the limiting beliefs change, as our feelings change about how our lives could be, actions just naturally arise, and we just start to take them. And this can be a really enjoyable process. And if you remember what I said at the beginning, this isn't a linear process, this 6-step plan. So we don't start at number 1 and keep going until we reach number 6. You can do this at any point. Step number 6, you can be doing at any point. And you can start it now. You can be creating new beliefs now. You can be thinking about how you'd like your life to be. And this can be really empowering and enjoyable. So this is step number 6 for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. So now, I've been repeatedly referring to EFT tapping and TAT, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what they are. So they are 2 very powerful and effective self-help tools. Now, I'm a therapist, I'm not just a coach. And what that means is that I'm not just interested in what you do, I'm really interested in how you feel, in your emotional health, your emotional happiness and well-being, and your physical well-being. But I'm really interested in your emotions and how you're feeling. And using these 2 tools really can allow you to change the way you feel anytime you want to. So these 2 tools are both therapeutic tools. You can use them to help you to feel better. And I can teach you how to do them, and they're things which you can do for yourself on a daily basis without needing to see me. So once you know how to do this, you can do this for yourself forever. They're easy, they're simple, they're flexible, and they're very gentle and very kind. And both of these techniques are sometimes referred to as energy psychology or energy techniques. And as I said, they're often described as being like emotional acupuncture, but without needles. But what both of these techniques do is they change how your emotions feel, and they change how your body feels. They can help you to improve your health, they can help you to sleep better, feel less stressed, and generally feel happier. And as you've probably gathered already, if you haven't seen these before, they both look completely mad and really unlikely. So the first one, EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques, that involves tapping on energy meridian points on your face and on your hands and on your body. You can do these fully dressed, and there are ways of doing this. Some of them are more discreet than others. So anytime you tap on your hands, that can be really discreet. And so when we're tapping, what we're doing is we're tapping on energy meridian points, and the tapping sends little pulses of energy through your energy meridians and clears any blockages which are in there. And you don't need to believe any of that. It works whether you believe in it or not. So there isn't anything you need to believe in this respect. It's really a case of you go through the process and you feel better. And generally speaking, that's what happens. Anytime people tap, it does actually change the way you feel. And on the whole, people almost always feel better afterwards, after they've tapped than before. So that's EFT tapping. The second one, TAT, tapas acupressure technique, I think in some ways looks even more mad and even more unlikely. So TAT involves holding a pose like this and putting your attention on surface statements. And you wouldn't think for a moment that that would have a big impact, but it does. These are both incredibly powerful and very effective. And just to give you an idea of how powerful they are, both of these techniques are used to help with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. They've both been widely used with traumatized war veterans, and they've both had a huge impact. So not only have they reduced the trauma down to normal levels, this is what the studies show, they're left with normal levels of trauma comparable with the normal population. Not only does it take the trauma away, 6 months later and a year later, it's still gone. So this is not just a sort of flash in the pan, this is something that lasts once you do it. So these are both very effective self-help tools. They're easy to learn, they're easy to do. I use them on myself. I can teach you how to do them. They're very kind and gentle. And knowing how to do this really is a gift to yourself, because it means that you can take care of your emotions, of your emotional health and your happiness on a daily basis for the rest of your life. No matter what happens, you can actually have the power to change the way you feel. And that is a really, really valuable skill to have. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit now about how I can help you to feel happier and more peaceful. So there are 3 ways. The first one is that I offer one-to-one individual therapy sessions using Skype, FaceTime or telephone, so you can be anywhere in the world. And I can provide guidance and support. I can actually help you to heal whatever it is you have in your emotional rain barrel. I can take you through the 6-step plan, and we can make sure that it's really tailored for you. I can help you to empty your emotional rain barrel, and I can teach you how you can use these tools to be happy and peaceful in a way that you can use them on a day-to-day basis. The second thing that I provide are tap-along videos, and I've been making tap-along videos since 2013. So the way that tap-along videos work is basically I will be tapping and I'll be saying some things, and what I do is I invite you to copy me, to copy the tapping and to repeat what I say. And each video is specifically aimed at a specific aspect of being happy and peaceful after childlessness or after a miscarriage. They're very focused. And so chances are what I'm saying might really apply directly to you. But the clever thing is that even if I'm not saying words that directly apply to you, our subconscious brain takes what I'm saying and it maps it across, and it sees, oh yes, she's saying that, but that means that for me. And you get the same, you get results anyway. Even if I'm not specifically addressing exactly how you're feeling, your unconscious maps across and you get great results anyway. So using EFT tap-along videos, they are very simple. All you have to do is watch and copy, and they don't require a lot of thought, they don't require concentration. It's pretty much the case of go through the motions and you feel better. So people almost always say they feel better after they've tapped with a tap-along video than before they did, than before they did it. So this is a very easy way to change the way you feel. And there are tap-along videos about being happy and peaceful after childlessness in each edition of the Childless Not by Choice magazine, and there will also be program videos coming from me shortly about that. And the last thing which I can offer is miscarriage support. Now, it's possible that if you are childless not by choice, you might have had one miscarriage or more, possibly multiple miscarriages. So I actually offer an online miscarriage support video program, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, any day of the year, including days when it's very difficult to get other kinds of support. There are two versions. There's one version for people who are still trying to have a baby, and then there are others. The other version is for people who are no longer trying or who might have had multiple miscarriages. It doesn't matter how long ago your miscarriage was, it's never too late to drain this out of your emotional rain barrel. The miscarriage support one consists of 16 tap-along videos, and which you can either download or you can live stream them. And as I say, it allows you to take the impact, drain the memories, the pain, the grief from the miscarriages out of your emotional rain barrel, and just create all of that extra space and room and capacity for yourself. And it really is a gift. So, lastly, I'd like to invite you to go to my website, which is peacefulbychoice.com. And if you sign up there are a number of free gifts which you'll receive. The first one is you'll get your own copy of the 6-step plan for being happy and peaceful after childlessness. And it goes into more detail. It includes little awareness exercises for each step. And there are also a series of little videos which I'll send you, one for each step in the plan. And as I said before, any of those steps are valuable, and you can begin now. You can actually make a start now to change how you're feeling. Second thing you'll receive is a free EFT tap-along video. The topic is easing the pain of childlessness. And that will give you a chance to actually try one, and it'll give you a little taste of the tapping. And you can use that as many times as you like, and I do recommend that. And lastly, I'd like to invite you to arrange an informal chat with me. You'd be very welcome to do that if you'd like. We can see how I can help you, and we can actually look and see how you would like your life to be. And this can be very informal and friendly. There's no obligation, and you can contact me through my website. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see me now. And so now we've reached the point where, first of all, I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope that this has been helpful so far. And I really would like to wish you some happiness and peace and joy wherever it is you are in your journey at this point now. And we've now reached the point of time where we are going to ask questions if you have any questions. So please do feel free to ask questions. I think, as Kat said before, there's a Q&A icon on the toolbar running across the bottom of the screen, and you can roll your mouse over the screen if you can't see it. And the questions won't show on the recording, but even so, we still recommend that you ask them anonymously. So I am going to transfer this back to Kat, I think.
Hi there, Rosalind. Thank you so much for that. That's great. There's some really good ideas, and I'm sure that lots of people will head over to your website as well to actually see some of the videos as well, because I'm sure, kind of actually going through the process will really help. One of the key things I think you mentioned there is that this isn't a linear process, that it's kind of, one step here, one step there, maybe a step back and forth. But if you stick with it, that you can actually get to the stage where you are peaceful and happy, which is a stage that anyone would like to be in their life, for sure. And after going through everything that's so difficult, when you are trying for a family, that's great to know that is a possibility. We have got a couple of questions here. If you want, I can read them to you. Is the tapping pattern always the same, with just the dialogue changing?
That's an interesting question. If you're using, so I actually use two versions of tapping. If you're using formal EFT, emotional freedom techniques, then yes, the tapping is always the same. And if you watch my videos, then I am always tapping in the same places. But having said that, so those are all the different places that you'll be tapping. And I know it looks completely mad if you've never seen this before. But having said that, there's also a simplified version called Simple Energy Techniques, which has been created by 2 EFT masters in Australia. They're both men, and they were looking to see what could you do that would have the same effect. So basically they're blokes working with Australian blokes, and your average Australian bloke doesn't want to necessarily go through the whole tapping routine and the formal statements. And what they've discovered is that you don't actually have to say stuff. You don't have to say anything, and you certainly don't have to tap all of these points. The key thing is to stimulate the energy meridians. So what they've discovered is that if you tap 3 or 4 or rub or hold any of those points in any order, it also has an impact. So when I am working with people directly, if we're using EFT, a lot of the time I use TAT, but if we're using EFT tapping, I will guide you through the formal steps. But if you're using it yourself, you can do the simplified version. And what I find is that that's such a easy thing to do. It's you don't get tangled up in, have I got the words right? I'm not sure what I should be saying. Oh my goodness, did I forget a step? I haven't got time to do this. You don't have to set special time aside. You can just tap, rub or hold any of those points in any order. And that's really easy to incorporate into your life. So I usually give people the choice. Do you want to do formal EFT? Because for some people that is incredibly powerful, but I don't reckon everybody is best suited to that. And what I've discovered is that since I've offered to teach people the simplified version, it's so simple, so easy to accommodate and incorporate, and you don't worry about getting it wrong, that people do it way more often. And the bottom line is, it's the tapping that makes the difference.
Great. Thank you. The next question is, do you believe it's better for our emotional rain barrel to avoid certain people who trigger us every time we see them, even if it's a family member?
Did you say who trigger it every time we see them? Did you say?
Yeah.
Well, there's no question about it. If they are filling up your emotional rain barrel, you have to empty it again. I mean, you don't have to empty it again, but the way to be happy is to empty it again. So it can be a tricky thing. It really can. I think there definitely is a balance to strike between what works for you as a family, you know, kind of a family unit. I'm not sure whether you said it was family. It may or may not be family.
Yeah.
Yes, family. Yeah. Well, that can be a huge challenge. That can be a huge challenge. I think it comes down to how much grief and distress does it cause you and everybody else if you don't see them altogether. What I would certainly recommend is the taking care of yourself before, during and after. I mean, that's such a powerful thing to do. We can take the stuff out of your emotional rain barrel about all the times they've upset you in the past, which may be an enormous amount of times. You know, that might be quite a thing to actually take on, but it's really worth doing, because then that kind of takes you back to a neutral point. And then you can tap when you're with them, which can again reduce the emotions while you're there, and you can always tap afterwards to diffuse whatever's left and help you to forget and help you to feel more gracious and peaceful about them. So I think probably a combination can be useful. If it is okay to avoid them, well, that's not a bad thing. If it's going to cause even more trouble to try and do that, then I would make sure we take care of them emotionally.
Great, thank you. Someone else has said thank you to you, Rosalind. It was really interesting and useful, which is great. So thank you for that person. And someone has asked if you could quickly demonstrate the hand tapping. Now, I know you have done it kind of as you've been talking, but I think if you can talk through perhaps, you know, what the physical kind of action is, what you are doing.
Absolutely. Very good. So to begin with, we'll start with the hand like this. And if you were going to do a karate chop, you would use this part of your hand. So it's the fleshy part below your little finger or pinky. And we call that the karate chop point. So we tap on that one, and you can tap on the other one. You can tap on either. You can tap fast or slow. Doesn't matter. You can swap at any point. So that's the karate chop point. That's the first one. And then we're going to move down your hand. So if you start from above, we are going to the outside edge of the thumbnail there and tapping on that. Then moving down the outside edge of your index finger nail, outside edge of your middle fingernail, or outside edge, the edge that keeps it as we go down. Ring fingernail, little fingernail or pinky, so we're moving down like that. Then if you make a fist, then you see that we've got dips between your knuckles. If you go to the last dip, and then just down a bit, there's a little hollow in the back of your hand there. And so we can tap there. And then we can tap above and below your, above and below your wrist. You can tap over jewelry or a watch, it doesn't matter. Okay? So karate chop point, side of your thumb, side of your fingernail, middle fingernail, ring fingernail, little finger or pinky, go to the dips, the last one, little hollow in the back of your hand there, and above and below your wrist. Okay? And so, as I said, you can tap or rub or hold any of those. So if you want to rub them, you can do that. If you want to just pinch these points, you can do that. If you want to tap, you can do that. You can rub like this. If you want to do the thumb, then if you wrap your finger over like that, that allows you to do it. Okay. So I actually have a YouTube video called An Introduction to Simple Tapping. And if you look at that, that runs through all of these there. It'll give you all the information you need to know to actually begin doing simple tapping.
Great,
okay?
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Right, so we've got another, thank you so much for everything you've shared tonight. And just want to say, even with what you've shared and knowing there are others listening to this too, it really helps. And I know that other people have said that, just having these webinars and the understanding that there is a community and there are lots of people watching live at the moment. And I have no doubt that many people will continue to watch this once we've shared the link to the video. But they follow on and say, is this 6-step plan something that our husbands or partners would benefit from?
Absolutely, anybody who wants to use this can use this. So the 6-step plan applies to any kind of time you're unhappy, actually, I would say. Let me think about that. I haven't thought about that in advance. You can certainly use it for after a miscarriage, for example. Yes, I think so. I think everybody has an emotional rain barrel. I mean, you know, if you believe that. Everybody has one. We all have stuff that has accumulated throughout our lives. And I think the older you get, chances are you are far more likely to have got to the point where right now it's reached the top now. The more unpleasant things that happen, you know, we do lose people, we have losses and upsets and traumas and all sorts of stuff. So anybody can benefit from draining their rain barrel. I really believe that's the case. Yes, definitely. And I think partners and, you know, spouses and husbands and have all had their own version of this. They've all been through their own version, and they've all got the things that they're grieving for. They have their own limiting and disempowering beliefs. So yes, absolutely. They have their own events which trigger them, and absolutely they probably want to be happy and peaceful on a daily basis and to create how they'd like their life to be. So by all means, share this with as many people as you like. That's what it's there for.
Fantastic, thank you. This isn't quite what the question says, but I'm going to ask it as a question. Does it work to tap your dog?
Yes, there's a large body of expertise about tapping for pets. There absolutely is. And you can use TAT, we call it surrogate tapping. You can tap for other people and you can tap for pets. And yes, there's a lady called Gwyneth Moss, who's an EFT master in Yorkshire, and she particularly specialises in tapping for animals. So you can either, I have a friend who taps on her dog. She's got a very patient dog. My dog wouldn't take that. But what you can do anytime you want to do surrogate tapping is basically what you're doing is you're tapping on behalf of somebody. It's as if you're offering it for them. They don't have to accept it. They don't even need to have to know that you're doing it. Sometimes people say, I think Americans often think about it like this in particular, would you pray for that person? If you pray for them, then you could certainly tap for them, and you may or may not tell them that you're doing that. So you're offering it. And what you can do is you can tap on yourself for the pet. So you can either imagine that you are them, or you can just sort of say to yourself, I'm doing this for whoever it is, and then tap on yourself on their behalf. And it does work, definitely. I've been on the receiving end of surrogate tapping on many occasions, and it's extraordinary. It's really extraordinary. And you can feel, I can feel, and people who do that, who've had it, feel the emotions changing as you do it. And it really feels like it's coming up from outside of you. And I actually do surrogate sessions on behalf of some of my clients. I have people who regularly pay me money to do surrogate tapping and TAT on their behalf. And I can feel it changing and they can feel it changing. So what they usually do is they text me beforehand and tell me how they feel. and then I tap and do TAT on that, and then I tell them how I felt it change, and they usually say, yes, I feel better, I feel more peaceful. Sometimes I do it for their whole family. So yes, it's a marvelously marvelously flexible and powerful tool.
Yeah, very powerful, definitely. Excuse me, sorry. We had a couple of other people say thank you, so yeah, like I will thank you at the end as well. We did have a question that came in beforehand. Do you have that to hand?
I do, yes. So it was somebody who was asking about how to feel more comfortable with the subject of childlessness in view of the taboos that still surround it. Well, first of all, we're all really sorry that there's a taboo around this, and we're working hard to address changing that. And I think that many of the steps in the six-step plan can help you to feel more comfortable, even though there is a taboo around this. We can help you to soften and heal any of the upsetting events from the past. We can help you to change the way you feel and to allow you to feel more comfortable, more optimistic, happier and more peaceful, and really support you in enjoying your life. Even though, it can feel like it's a taboo thing, that doesn't mean that you have to feel limited by that.
Great, thank you. Well, just a couple more comments saying, yeah, how fascinating it was. I think there'll be a few people trying the tapping for themselves and also the surrogate tapping as well.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to round up just by saying thank you to everyone who has attended this webinar. Thank you so much, Rosalind, for joining us and giving up your time to do this. It's really, really generous of you. We really very much appreciate it. The series of webinars is going to continue. The next one is next month with Russell Davis, who is going to be talking about like living your best life, and even though you are childless not by choice, really making the most out of life, which I'm sure will be interesting to everyone. As with the tapping, everyone can tune into that, whether you have experienced being childless not by choice, it's your partner or husband who is in the same situation, or family members as well, because I think it's really important for people who don't necessarily understand the situations and the difficulties around being childless not by choice. They can tune in so they can kind of get a new understanding. I think that's really important, and hopefully we can slowly, one by one, help to break the taboo around childlessness and all start living peaceful and happy lives. So check out the website, it's fertilitynetworkuk.org. And you can read up more about the webinars there. We will be sharing a link to this webinar over the next couple of days, so look out for that. And yeah, just left to say thank you so much, Rosalind. We really, really appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.